5th, 2025. It is 9 a.m. I'm calling this meeting to order. And the first item on our agenda is we're gonna do public comment. Do we have any? Then item number 2, public comment. I'm gonna close public comment. Do we wanna start, do we have quorum?
No,
We have
we
quorum.
go into,
Yeah, okay,
We do?
good.
Yeah.
So-
There's three of us.
So good, we have 3, all right, so action item 3A is approve the February 12th, 2025 minutes. Do I have a motion?
so move.
Second.
I have a motion and a second, and a discussion on the minutes. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. 3B is federal lobbyist extension, and Al Burns, you will take care of that item for us?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, board member, committee members. Al Burns, your highly motivated procurement director. As you know, I monitor all the contracts here at PSTA, and I monitor them for 2 things: the expiration date and the amount of monies to make sure that we don't go over. If I discover or if I'm notified, and we look at these weekly. So this action item here this morning is to approve a 3-month extension, an additional $21,000 with Vanscoy Incorporated for a revised end date of July 21st and a revised not to exceed amount of $441,000. Just a little bit of background, you all know him as Harry, I know him as Vanscoy Incorporated. They have been doing work for us for the last 5 years in the field of of our federal lobbyists. They provide representations regarding different federal transit initiatives before Congress, the Senate, and the United States DOT, and the FTA, and other related interest groups. Mr. Mayor, you and I had the pleasure of going to the Hill with you and Brad one legislative conference, and Van Scoik was the one that escorted us around. I'd like to highlight some of the accomplishments that Van Scoik helped PSTA receive in the form of competitive grants. In your packet, you'll notice a table that I put together to highlight some of these things. In 2020, they helped with the replacement buses and charging infrastructure of an amount of $1.2 million. The Central Avenue BRT, better known as the Sunrunner, 21.8. The Sunrunner Transit Oriented Development Study, 3.7 million. Once again, in 2020, replacement buses in the amount of $18.3 million. The most important project to me and the most important project at PSTA, the Clearwater Transit Center RAISE grant in amount of $20 million. And then in 2024, again, replacement buses. And one that's near and dear to my heart is a recent grant, the SMART grant for senior/veteran fare discount. From a procurement lens, the procurement department wishes to extend this contract by 3 months to maintain continuity during a competitive federal funding season and to allow for a robust solicitation. We will be going, Van Scoik does an outstanding job, but once again, their contract is about to expire, so we're gonna go out for a robust solicitation and hope to garner competition. The original not to exceed amount was $420,000 or $7,000 a month. I'm asking for an additional $21,000, and that will cover a 3-month extension with Van Scoik. The fiscal impact of this action item, this is an annual budgeted item inside our operating budget. And Mr. Chair, once again, the recommendation that I bring before committee this morning is approve a 3-month extension and an additional $21,000 with Van Scoik Incorporated for a revised contract end date of July 21st and a revised not to exceed amount of $441,000. It is a pleasure to be before the legislative. I normally only come before the finance. If there's any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you so much. David, you have a question?
I just wanted to clarify, that's over 5 years and 3 months, the
Yes, yes.
$441,000.
Yes, sir.
Anything else? Any other questions? Yes.
Okay, so, first of all, good morning, everyone. So you said that it was already budgeted, or so we can afford the additional 21,000?
That is absolutely correct, yes.
So if it was already budgeted, the question I'm trying to ask is, will we find a need to extend it further? Because if they've been with us 5 years,
Yes,
the
ma'am.
contract ends in July, shouldn't we be now doing a contract renegotiation?
That is a very good question, Commissioner, and this morning I brought with me my procurement plan. Right now, I put, with Brad's help, writing the scope of work, I put the solicitation together, and currently is at BMO, our general counsel, for review, and I anticipate, releasing the solicitation around the middle of this month. So we're getting ready to go out for a full and open competition, for these services.
But, and just to clarify, the contract actually ends in April.
April.
Yes.
Okay, well, with the extension though, at the end of July,
Yes, ma'am.
okay.
Yeah, but
Okay.
we'll be back before this committee for approval of the new company or
I'm trying for
same
May.
company.
I just put me a little bit of, just in case, June. So I anticipate coming back to you about either May or June with the new contract.
Sounds great. Any other questions?
Thank you.
All right, then I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Move approval?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion on this item? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Al, thank you. Great job.
Thank you, sir. Stay motivated.
Yes, absolutely. All right. We starting with Henry this morning, Brad?
We can start with Harry. Now
Harry's
that,
up there.
This contract was extended by Al.
All right, Harry, good morning and welcome. Is the snow gone?
Good morning, yes, sir, snow is 60 degrees here today, right now, but it's March, so it could snow again tomorrow, who knows, so, but no, it's been nice the last couple days, so.
Nice.
You need to come up and see us, anyway, I guess I feel like a broken record on our federal updates for you, I guess to give you an update on where we are, and the State of the Union was last night, which well, it actually was an address to Congress, wasn't technically a State of the Union, but that technically kicks off what's supposed to be the next fiscal year cycle, budgeting cycle for Congress. It's one of the things that the president's supposed to do is come up and talk about his budget ideas for next year. We're still struggling to wrap up the funding for the current year. We're almost halfway through the fiscal year and don't have the fiscal year 25 appropriations bills done. As you may be tracking, Congress it would appear, has decided to do a full-year continuing funding resolution to basically fund the federal government on automatic pilot at fiscal 24 levels. So that's the direction they decided to go. They tried for the last couple of weeks to reach an agreement on a path forward to do individual appropriations bills, and they were unsuccessful. So later this week, Congress is going to report out a fairly, what they call clean, with not a lot of legislative provisions, extension of federal funding to go all the way through September 30th, which is the end of this current fiscal year, and try and get that done. It's really questionable right now whether the House can pass that. Right now the House only has a 2-vote majority for the Republicans, so they would basically need everybody to be in sync to do that. Practically what that does, and Brad and Debbie may have more thoughts on this. I don't think it really impacts you all that much. The 25 levels were basically the same as the 24 levels for most of your formula programs and other, the Low-No Bus Grant program and the Race Grant program, the things you typically compete for. So from that standpoint, I don't know that it has a huge impact on you. The one impact it does have is that if we go to this automatic pilot method here, all of the congressionally directed spending, the earmarks, would be lost. So Congress would not have an ability to fund those individual projects in any of the 12 appropriations bills, but in particularly this one, the transportation appropriations bill. So you have one project in there for this year, which is $1 million for the 34th Street improvements that you're trying to do out there. So now that said, the optimist in me continues to believe, and we hear this from the committee, that even though they're going to make this decision at the end of this week and vote on it next week, there's still an appetite in the House and the Senate to try and do some of the individual, not all, but some of the individual appropriations bills and try and get them done. And if that way they were successful, then those bills would supersede the automatic pilot continuing resolution method. If that happens, and transportation is one of the 4 or 5, maybe 6 bills we're talking about doing, if transportation were to be enacted separately, then earmarks would come back to life and you would be able to secure that funding for the 34th Street project. So a lot has to happen for that to be successful, but there is, Brad, a little bit of optimism that maybe something will happen. It is the bill with the most congressional earmarks in all of the 12, so there's an appetite to want to do that, to help these projects out. So we'll continue to monitor that and let you know how it's gonna go. If they're unsuccessful at trying to pass this full year continuing resolution, then Congress likely, or the federal government likely goes into a shutdown mode starting at midnight next Friday, a week from Friday. Again, I don't know, Brad, Debbie, I think apportionment payments, some of those things continue because of some of that money, the apportionment money primarily is funded through the Highway Trust Fund, which is not impacted by the appropriations process. So your apportionment funds and some of those things would continue to be processed, I believe. But other things, grants and other things would be probably on hold until the government would reopen. And that is at the same time, as you know, we're dealing with right now, the new administration put a freeze on most grants and contracts for a 90-day review once the president came into office. So that 90-day, we're about a little over halfway through that 90-day review process. So a lot of the things that you have received, some of the things Al talked about that were competitively awarded are on hold pending review by the new administration at the Department of Transportation and the interim folks at the FTA. So all this said to say there's a lot of confusion right now. I mean, the hope I think is that Congress will not shut down, and that's bad for many reasons, not just your program. So hopefully the Congress is successful in keeping the government running. They're successful in maybe negotiating out a few of these individual bills and getting some of those down, like the transportation bill, and we're able to salvage some of those earmarks. In addition to that, then we have to pivot right away into the fiscal 26 budgeting and appropriations cycle. The president's expected to send his broad outline for a budget to Congress at the end of this month, with a more detailed budget proposal coming out sometime in early April. That will then kick off work on the next set of appropriations bills for fiscal year 26, which that fiscal year begins on October 1st. So one of the things I think we've talked to Brad about is trying to identify a project or projects that you want to submit to the appropriations committee. Kathy Castor's always been great about being interested in supporting projects. We'd have to think if we're unsuccessful with the 25 project that's currently in the bill, if that doesn't get funded because the bill doesn't get done, may want to think about moving that request to 26, or we talked about maybe doing something, Brad, related to the ferry grant infrastructure. That would also be eligible for an earmark. The other thing, other 2 news items, we were in, some of the county folks were up on Monday, and we were in to see Congresswoman Luna, and she was asking them for projects. So if you have something, Brad, that would be in that part of the county, she's looking for appropriations requests to consider supporting through the appropriations process. And we were in to see Senator Moody the other day, and they have not made a final decision on whether they're going to entertain earmark requests or not. They're still thinking about it. So there could be a possibility that she might entertain appropriations requests. We'll continue to monitor that, Brad. So there's at least one avenue to seek support, but there might be as many as 3. So we should give some thought to how we want to position some of your projects. Brad, I would think that the portals where we have to submit these projects will probably open, if they pass a continuing resolution, sometime late March, early April. So we probably have 2 or 3 weeks to pull together a couple of ideas on what you want to do there. So that's kind of the funding situation. You know, as you well have seen, much of the Department of Transportation's attention over the last couple of days has been on the FAA and air traffic controllers and commercial air safety issues and all of that. So I think there's been virtually nothing said about the transit programs. It's most of the Secretary's focus has been on airline aviation security. So there's been no movement, Brad, on the nomination of Mark Molinaro to be the new FTA administrator. I don't think they've even scheduled a hearing yet for him yet, so it's gonna be probably a couple weeks at the earliest until he's able to be confirmed and in position, so outside of that, I guess the only other item I would have for you all is as you may have seen last week, the House passed a budget resolution which kind of sets the framework for spending goals for the rest of this fiscal year. It's separate from the appropriations process. It's a bit confusing, but that kind of tees up this other thing that's going on in Congress called the budget reconciliation process. Budget reconciliation is a method, an expedited way that Congress can make substantial changes in spending and revenue outside of the appropriations process. So with this, this process will direct each of the committees in Congress, including the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, to identify places where they believe they can reduce spending. It would all be then incorporated into one bill, along with an extension of the 2017 tax reform bill and all the changes that the president's proposed in tax structure. All those things would be combined into this larger budget reconciliation package that Congress would consider in late April or May. The risk to you all is that the Transportation Committee could put on that list for future spending cuts, things like the Raise Grant Program, the Low No Bus Program, and some of those other programs, again, that we mentioned that you compete for. Some of that is funded through the regular appropriations process, but a large portion of those programs are funded through the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And that's where they could try and, what they call, claw back some of those funds that were authorized by Congress 3 years ago in the bipartisan infrastructure bill. That bill runs through the end of next fiscal year. So kind of a convoluted, we got a lot of things happening at the same time here. For those of you who are municipal city council members, commissioners, this reconciliation bill could impact your communities in other ways, like things like community development block grant programs, talking about eliminating the tax deductibility for municipal bonds. That could impact anybody, any public agency that issues municipal bonds, or some conversation about eliminating the tax deductibility as a revenue source to pay for other tax changes. So there will be a lot in this budget reconciliation bill that reaches many different communities and programs. So we'll continue to monitor that for you too. And we're happy to answer any questions that you may have about that process. Brad, I think we really haven't made any more further progress on the taxi cab exemption. I think we had talked the other day, you and I had talked about trying to engage with Uber again to find out where they are in that process. And Brad, I think you're scheduling a trip up here in a couple days where we're gonna try and get over to DOT to meet with some of the new folks over there and explain this provision and what it means, what the impact would be on your transit agency, but others around the country. So we'll probably have more information on our call next month about that. Mr. Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions. I kind of rambled on there a little bit, but happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Harry. Great job. Any questions for Harry? Anyone? Nope. I think we're good. Brad, you got any comments?
Well, no, thank you, Harry, and not that that's necessarily the greatest, most uplifting report about our programs. On the positive side, I think Uber told me last week that they had a meeting with Secretary Duffy, and so the Secretary of Transportation is aware of this whole drug and alcohol situation program with Uber and Lyft. At least they heard Uber's perspective, which is opposed to any cancellation of their participation in our programs. The ending tally on the public comment was like 800 and some public comments were submitted into the federal government from across the country. Something like 30-something transit systems, and the average, Uber told me that the average number of public comment to an FTA rule or regulation is like 25, and they said 800. So hopefully they at least know that people care about it. And about 90% of the comments were opposed to what the federal government wants to do, to ban Uber and Lyft. They want the program to continue. So that was also positive. So we'll see on that, and we'll see just on the funds that are being held up right now.
Hey Brad, on that point, you know, the new administration is not issuing anything, any new regulations right now. I mean, the Federal Register has gone from a couple hundred pages a day to 20 or less. So, I mean, they're really rolling back. So I would think in our situation, I guess I'd ask your opinion on this. Right now, I can't anticipate that FTA is gonna issue some new guidance on the taxi cab exemption. They just don't seem to want to issue new regulations. So then I think the thing that we would need to look out for, if they're not gonna clarify with new guidance, the taxi cab exemption, we need to make sure in those meetings we have that they continue to interpret the existing regulations in a way that allows you to operate as you currently operate. I mean, I think, correct? I mean, I think
Yeah.
we need to make sure, on the one hand, we don't want them to change the regulations, but on the other hand, if they do nothing, then we don't want them to penalize you for the existing regulations. So I think we need to, and I'd be interested to see what Uber's saying about that, but we need to make sure that they don't make any changes that would penalize you and other transit agencies.
The only other thing, Mr. Chair, that I know Commissioner Driscoll sent me a PowerPoint from her National League of Cities Transportation Committee, which was kind of ominous, or talked about all about these funding freezes and things like that that are going on right now. Did you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, sure, and I sent it to Harry as well. So the National League of Cities Federal Advocacy Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure Services had a meeting on February 17th, and they have had many meetings with people associated with the Department of Transportation, and pulled together just a great summary of what is coming out of the White House right now, the executive orders, and trying to figure out what a lot of it means. They're creating basically a new litmus test for projects that are related to transportation. They are looking for, they like projects that have a user pay model. They like projects that help families. So some of you may have heard that there was an announcement that there would be a focus on helping areas that have higher levels of marriage rates and birth rates. What NLC was able to do was really have some conversations that drilled down to what they really mean by that. Because on the surface, it sounds a little odd, but the way that we approach that is with a project, ask, how does this help families? That's what they really want. And Harry, you can correct me if I'm wrong or if you've heard, other takes on this. I'm just explaining how NLC is interpreting this through their, based on the conversations that they've had. They would like to focus on local opportunity zones. So if there's a city or a part of our county that is within an opportunity zone and a transportation project would support that, that gets their attention. So, it's basically a lot of do's and don'ts. I mean, they'll also be looking for sort of their the hot buttons, like DEI and Justice 40 and environmental related stuff. There's still, there's like a lot of consternation about it, let's put it that way. If there's, I don't know, Brad, if we have money that's been awarded but we haven't received the grant agreement, that they said, any entity that is waiting on a grant agreement can expect for new terms and conditions to be included with that. So I'm just hoping that means we'll have an opportunity to revise the language for a grant to be able to receive it. So there's that, and then they're looking out for places that are imposing vaccine mandates and mask mandates, which the state of Florida doesn't really have that, so we don't have to worry about that. So it's kind of a bit of a cornucopia of items to look out for, and to just sort of rethink our approach. The goal can be the same. You know, that was the overall message. National League of Cities is really prioritizing the Safe Streets and Roads for All program, which the city of St. Petersburg has been a recipient of grant funding for that. And so that's something that's important to our city. And the administration seems to be supportive of that. They do say that safety is a priority for them, so anytime you can include how a project will help to increase safety, that's a big deal. And right now with Tampa Bay being kind of at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to pedestrian safety, things like that, we have some work to do, and so we could get some attention by showing how any project can help to improve road safety and pedestrian safety. Harry, am I on the
Yeah,
right track here?
Right, you are, so, a couple thoughts, this kind of emanates from, I think we talked about this on our last call, at our last meeting, that the Secretary of Transportation, I think it was January 29th, it was I think it was the day after or 2 days after he was confirmed and sworn in as secretary, issued two orders. One was, Commissioner talked correctly about eliminating funding for some climate-related things, DEI, I mean, trying to filter out those kind of projects. But he also issued a second one. It was called Ensuring Reliance Upon Sound Economic Analysis of Department of Transportation's Policies, Programs, and Activities. And that's where you're correct in citing, you talked about marriage rates and birth rates and all of that. But there's a section in here where he talks about the programs that DOT is going to fund should be consistent to the extent practicable with relevant, appropriate, consistent with our priorities. I mean, this administration says the benefits may include, but are not limited to, and this is important, I think, for you all, because this is what you do, not limited to economic opportunities such as increased access to jobs, healthcare facilities, recreational activities, commercial activity, or any actions or project components that will help alleviate poverty, enhance safety, and primarily benefit families and communities by improving the quality of their lives, raising their standard of living, or enabling them to participate more fully in our economy. So I think, the idea that you all get people to their jobs, get people to their schools, get people to the medical appointments, any continuing to emphasize the role of your services in doing that work in Pinellas County as the only group that can do that work, I think is really important. I think it'll score well. The other thing I will say is, if we reflect back to the first Trump administration, Brad knows this from the meetings we had at FTA, the first administration was not excited about rail projects. They were not excited about fixed route infrastructure because they felt like it wasn't flexible enough. They liked, we talked about at the time, we were talking about Sunrunner with them. They liked the idea of BRT, where you could change the route if you needed to, that you could put more buses on a particular route or move buses around. So they like flexibility. So I think these are all things that are good, strongly in your favor, in your wheelhouse of the ways that you can work with the FTA. So I think emphasizing, talk about the things that they want to hear about in your future grant applications. And I think in talking to them, Brad, about releasing the grants that are on hold right now, how each of those grants meets these goals that they're trying to meet that's set out in this document. So I think, Commissioner, I think you're right. I think, just trying to align with what they want to do, I think is good. I think some of your programs, projects run through opportunity zones. Brad, I'm not sure about the Clearwater Transit Center, but I think some of your other, I know the Sunrunner must go through some opportunity zones on its way into and out of the city. So anything we can do to help you formulate that message, we'd like to do. But I think you're well aligned.
Yeah, so just in closing, I'm heading up to DC in a few days for the National League of Cities Congressional City Conference, where I'll have another meeting with this committee, and they're working on getting us some meet and greets or short meetings with members of the Transportation Infrastructure Services Committee on the House side, and also with someone from Secretary Duffy's office. Secretary Duffy, at that time, they hadn't confirmed yet, but they were working on having him as a speaker during one of the general sessions. And there could be an opportunity to meet him. Of course, you can't sit in him or at policy, but that's why I like to go up, because NLC really brings out these key players and also gets us meetings with staffers and others who really do have an influence on policy and give us that opportunity to give our elevator pitch, if you will. And Harry, I hope to see you too while I'm there.
We'll get together.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
I'm
you.
I'm so glad you're on the NLC. I wish my city was. We used to be, but no longer. Are you involved in that at all?
I'm in Florida League of Cities, but I do attend the NLC.
No. Is your city involved in NLC? David,
I think so.
are they? But thank you for that great update. I really appreciate it. All right, Harry, great job. Thank you again. We'll see you next month. Is Ron here?
He is not here. He
Okay,
deputized me to give his update this morning when he called me and said that he had a meeting with the senator switched to 9:15.
okay.
So sorry, you get me.
Well, it's legislative week. It's getting
It is,
started. It's
yeah.
crazy up
Starts
there.
today.
It is.
Chair?
Yes.
May I- Sorry, there was one thing I wanted to ask Harry, but I wanted to get out before he goes.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
And Harry, if you don't know, I'm wondering if you can look into this and get back to us. There was, in the materials that I shared with you, there was part of it that said, there was a piece that said something about they don't want to approve grants for projects that are purely local in nature. And NLC has not figured out what that means yet. So that's my mystery for you to solve, if you can. I don't know if you've looked into it or asked what that means, but we need to know so that if we have to present projects and opportunities in a more regional sense, what does local mean? Is it city? Is it county? Do we need to look at Florida? I mean, however we need to position things we can if we know what they're looking for.
I mean, I will tell you what we've heard from related, I haven't heard exactly how the Department of Transportation is interpreting that, but other direction we've gotten from other agencies is, think of it this way, if you're asking for federal dollars to build, use it in a library, whatever, something, a building in St. Petersburg or wherever that would be a library that would be run by the city, I think the administration's position is there's no federal role in that, right? I mean, that's a library that's gonna be run and used through the city. Other than the federal government being the pass-through for the money, there's no federal role. As opposed to, you are a transit agency that's partnered with the federal government. You receive funding from the federal government to manage the fleet of buses and other programs that you partner with the federal government on. They funded your Sunrunner program. They have done provided the charging infrastructure. I mean, so it's been a federal partnership. So for them to support a project for the Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority, that makes sense because you're a federal partner with them, as opposed to the city of St. Petersburg would not be a federal partner on a library. They would be taking the federal funds, but there's no federal program that really links them up to that library. So I hope that makes some sense. And if you could just think of like think of the Pinellas County Beach Project. There's a federal partnership. It's an authorized federal program. So for the federal government to invest in that program, that makes sense, right? Interstate highways are a federal interstate highway. Federal priority routes on the local roads there's a federal partnership there. So I think what they're just trying to say is the federal government doesn't want to just be a pass-through of funding to do something on the local side. They want to fund projects in which they are partner with the community. So I think in writing your grant applications, Brad, if you could talk about the ongoing partnerships between PSTA and the federal government, I think that would be helpful. Does that help, Commissioner?
Yes, it does. So I just wonder then, within PSTA, it serves not just local, but we have, so as an example, we could use the Clearwater project that we have to build the station, the center there. That's in Clearwater, it's a building in one city, but the service that's going to come out of that is going to serve the entire county. So would that would be okay?
Yeah, but it's also, it's a partnership, I mean, you receive federal funds to support the work of PSTA, and the Clearwater Transit Center is a component of that because it supports PSTA. So I think that's
Okay,
what
so
I'm
more
saying.
big
I
picture.
think that you're receiving federal funds for federal transit programs, and so that one makes sense. Again,
Okay.
if you were building that library, there's not a federal
There's not a bigger
library
picture.
regular program, right? So, I mean.
Okay, I got it, thank you.
All right, we have David, you have a question?
Yeah, just to add to that, when we were in Washington, I remember at the FTA, I mean, they kept asking us about the intermodal center. How, is this gonna be a regional thing? I mean, they were pushing, is this gonna be, who does this serve besides Clearwater? I remember them asking that. And I'm like, yes, it's part of a bigger network of, it's one of the busiest centers that we have, so
Yeah.
that's kind of where what they look at. It's something that's attached to something bigger.
Right,
It's also intermodal too. I think they like the part of it that would be intermodal. That
Exactly.
you could eventually
Yeah.
connect rail or bike paths or other services there, so.
Well, the good news is on that, we have signed that contract, we have that raised grant, and we're able to, the money will flow. The money is flowing for that project and all of our formula projects. We have a hold on three of our grants that I know of, but I'm very happy to report that as of yesterday, we have all of the grants fully submitted to the federal government and just ready for whenever they open up the portal or whatever they're gonna do, to hit the button and get those grants. That is for the electric buses that we already ordered from Gillig, and so we need that funding. It is for the tram, the funding for the tram for St. Petersburg and electric infrastructure for PSTA that the board just approved last week. And then it's the SMART grant we got for seniors and veterans to get discounted fares on their Flamingo app. Those are, we don't have those agreements yet, so we're waiting to hear, but we're gonna
Alright.
keep hope alive.
But we know that won't happen before April, right? Because aren't they subject to that 90-day
Yeah,
wait period?
well, we've heard 90 days, yeah,
Okay,
hopefully in April.
April, that's what I thought.
All right,
Open it up.
anything else for Harry? All
No.
right, Harry, now you can go back to the snow.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, have a
Hi,
great day.
Harry.
On the state legislative, it started yesterday, and Ron, this morning, Ron wanted me to be very positive about the state. We're in a much better position this year than we were a year ago at this time because there's no local bill. There's really nothing so far, at least, that we can see that is targeted at PSTA.
Yay.
Which is very good. The DOT bill did get filed last week. This is the governor's package of DOT policies to change for the Florida Department of Transportation. And that bill last year had a lot of stuff that affected public transit. There's a lot less in there this year. The three things that I could think of that had sort of indirect, really minimal effect on PSTA, but one is the Florida Transportation Commission, which is sort of an entity that has existed for a long time that was actually slated for elimination last year, but now has been resuscitated, and they wanted to give them more things to do. Commissioner Hazelton was just appointed to that commission. They had their first meeting that she attended on Monday. The Florida Transportation Commission would now receive reports and oversee not just a handful of transit agencies like they've done in the past, but every transit agency, including PSDA. So what that would mean is we would have to give them a annual report on what is going on at PSDA. At least that's what the systems have done so in the past. Two, and Ron mentioned these last month, the Florida legislature approved a cap on transit spending as a percentage of the overall Florida DOT $14 billion budget of 20%. And the DOT bill wants to ratchet that down to 15%, which would put it pretty close to where it's at right now. It's about 15%, so that's a little concerning. And then third, last year they agreed to sweep out any unobligated funds from the New Starts matching fund that Florida DOT has for capital projects like the Sunrunner. The state provides half of the non-federal match. They do that all across the state of Florida. And then last year they approved a sweeping of any funds that were left over and not allocated, and the money was then put into the highway pot for highways. And and then Senator Sigley, thanks to him and the Transportation Committee, put a sunset provision on that it was that sweeping would sunset and go away in 2026. And then the proposed bill from the DOT is to not have it sunset. Keep doing that. That could have a impact in the future. Very good news, the Transportation Disadvantage Bill, which is also filed for the first time in ever, has provisions that Ron and I have been working on for like 5 years on updating the code in Florida law that affects public transit, 1490, to allow for Uber and Lyft. This is like a miracle. This is great news. It's in the bill. And Ron said he was meeting with the senator who's carrying that bill, so I don't know. That would be just unbelievable. I just never thought I had given up all hope. So some good progress for sure. Yeah. Next week I'm going to Tallahassee with the Pinellas Chambers, St. Petersburg, Clearwater, and
We'll be there.
and City of Clearwater is going to be there too, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So we'll be there together next week. We've got a meeting with the Secretary of Transportation scheduled for Wednesday or Tuesday afternoon with the chambers, so you're welcome to come with me.
Okay.
There to meet Secretary Perdue and talk to him. Yeah. And then Ron even offered that he would come and update the group assembled.
When are you going up? On Tuesday or Monday?
Up early Tuesday morning.
You
I
driving?
think that's what we're going up Tuesday
Maybe.
morning.
Yeah, so and then we're gonna go at the end of the month. And Commissioner Sanders is gonna come with me.
Perfect.
Yeah. And we'll go around with Ron and talk to all these people. Well, we'll see what happens. By then, things will have changed. Hopefully for the better.
Great.
Yeah.
Any questions? Great job, Brad. Thanks for that update. You sounded just like Ron. All right, any other business? Item 6, anybody have any other business they want us to discuss? All right, guys, great meeting. Thank you, staff. Thank you for everything. Meeting adjourned.
Next meeting?
Oh yeah, next meeting is April 2nd, 2025. Now it's adjourned.